Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. Today's guest on the show is a man who has made a huge impact on my life since we first met. He is no stranger to the challenges of life, such as his own journey in healing addiction with the help of plant medicines and psychedelics. He is an artist who wears his heart on his sleeve in the form of his music, his poetry, and his mission to help others who are struggling with addiction move through that stage of their life with grace, ease, and confidence, and is a shining example of what plant medicines can offer us when we interact with them responsibly and with intention. So, with all of that being said, please help me in giving a very warm welcome to my man, Matt Bundy. Matt, my man, what is up?
Dude, it is so good to be talking to you.
Yeah, man. Anytime I get a chance to talk to you, I'm like, signed, sealed, delivered. That's why when you hit me up, I was like, oh, this is a no-brainer.
Dude, yeah, I remember when you were talking about how you were going to do this show in like December. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing your first episode come out and just being like, it's doing the thing.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a lot of, what we're going to talk about today. You and I having gone through a lot of the same self-development programs and also having done psychedelics together and all these things. It's so incredible to me to watch people move through blockades, barricades, these things that life throws at us, right? And one of the things I love to do in the beginning is check in with people on how they first got introduced to psychedelics, Now, I know for you, you're only 23 right now? 24? 24. Yeah, you're a youngin', man. I'm the big 3-0 now, So I love, of course, when you were growing up, I imagine, depending on where you grew up, I forget exactly where you grew up, but, cannabis was a little bit more widely accepted. I imagine some psychedelics, it wasn't so like blasphemous. I know when I was growing up, like it wasn't until 2008 that cannabis was decriminalized in Boston. And so there were a couple of years where I was a cannabis user where like, you have a dime bag, you could, they'd be like, hey, this might ruin your life. So we're going to definitely ruin your life by putting you in jail. It's a strange concept there. And so I'd love to hear how you first got introduced to psychedelics and how that journey has progressed throughout the years. Did you use them at first for fun and now it's something different? Those kind of things. Take it away, my man.
So I started using cannabis when I was 12, which for anyone listening, numbers are relative, but that is too young. Yeah. I would not recommend that to anybody. I was like, I don't even think I'd started puberty when I started, which is not good.
Start puberty first.
Yeah, definitely. And my very first experience with any type of psychedelics was actually something called 2CI, which is not really something I would recommend in general. It's first of all, it's manufactured. It's not a plant medicine. It's something that's made in a laboratory.
Yeah, it's a research chemical.
I remember having some kind of fun experiences with it and then having one when I was 15 that all of a sudden I started looking at my hands and I'm like, why do I have fingers? Why are my fingers attached to my hand? Why is my hand attached to an arm? And then I'm looking at my friend's mouth and his face and I'm like, none of this makes sense. And I felt like that scene in Matrix when Neo got pulled out of the tube.
Yeah.
But then instead of like being brought to like the cool Matrix area, I was just like left in the laboratory watching the other people in the tubes and just being like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Dude, it was crippling. My friends like know I'm on this stuff and they're being like with their fingers and like messing with me. And I'm like literally going into like psychosis. And so after that, I decided to kind of lean away from anything made of chemicals, at least for a while.
Yeah.
And I tried mushrooms for the first time when I was 15. And that was also, for me, I was not ready at all. I had heard about, the only thing I really knew about mushrooms is they make you see cool shit. That's literally my only knowledge of them. And I bought a quarter, so 7 grams from somebody. And he told me, take an eighth, which is 3.5 grams. That's a good starter dose. I would like to go on the record and say that 3.5 grams is not a starter dose.
Yeah, agreed.
Like, it's a good dose for if you're going into ceremony with some serious intention and you're going to like really do some work, but it's not something you want to do for fun while you're trying to watch The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And
I'll take never again for 500, please.
yeah. And so my parents were supposed to be out of town for the night. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll just do some mushrooms. My friend was there with me. He didn't really want to do mushrooms, so he was just going to kind of babysit me. So I eat an eighth, and it's been about 45 minutes. I'm not really feeling anything. So I made the most classic mistake that anybody could make, and I ate the other eighth.
Yep. I know that mistake well.
That should have been my first indication that I was an addict. The fact that I'm like, oh, I'll just take double.
The signs were there.
Yeah. So basically I eat it and I'm literally watching The Simpsons. And I remember the theme song being like so beautiful. Like the clouds are parting and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, okay, these are mushrooms. Let's go. And then my parents come home. It was kind of late. Switch. Yeah, it was kind of late. I wasn't fully feeling them yet. So they just kind of like tell me they're home. And I'm like, okay, mom and dad, cool. Like, I'm just going to watch TV until I fall asleep. And they're like, okay, we're going to bed. They go to bed. And these mushrooms start hitting. 7 grams for anyone listening who's not really familiar with psychedelics. That is about 2 grams above what's considered a heroic dose. Once again, I had no idea about any of this stuff at the time. And they kick in, and I'm really kind of freaking out. My friend's asleep, and I'm just on the couch watching The Simpsons, and I'm starting to absolutely lose my mind. So I'm like, oh, I'll just turn up the TV. I hit the wrong button on the remote because I couldn't see the remote. And the TV goes to that gray, like, static thing, like in Poltergeist.
Yeah.
And just gets stuck on there. And I'm looking at the remote, and the buttons are like doing everything but being actual buttons. And I cannot figure out how to get it off. And I start losing my mind. It's pitch black. There's static on the screen. My friend's asleep. I'm afraid to wake my friend up. So I just start pacing back and forth in this room, like literally just losing my mind. I decide to get naked. I don't know why, but
common theme with psychedelics. Yeah.
Yeah. I just decided to hop into the stereotype immediately. I get naked. I go into the bathroom. I look at myself in the mirror and I do not recognize myself at all. And I'm like, okay, nobody's ever died from mushrooms before. I'm going to be the first.
Yeah.
For sure. So this is it. So I'm starting to think, and I'm like, these are literally poisonous mushrooms that I fed myself and I ate too many, and now my body's poisoned. I need to puke. So I start going to puke, and I'm literally just like stabbing the back of my throat with my fingers, and nothing is happening. Nothing. I'm like flicking around my little punching bag thing in the back of my throat, like nothing is happening. So I'm just like, okay, this is it. I'm going to die. I'm picturing my funeral. I'm picturing everybody speaking, like I'm literally like seeing my funeral and like my mom crying, and I'm like, oh God, okay, I gotta tell my parents what's going on. So I walk out and I'm walking towards their room, and that's when I realize I'm like, I don't think I would just be better for them to find me dead. They don't need to watch me die. I'm gonna die no matter what. They're just so I'm like pacing back and forth in the room. The static is still going. I turn off the TV finally, and then it's just pitch black. And I'm like, this is not okay. So I hit buttons on the thing until the static comes back. And I'm like, this is pretty bad, but at least I can kind of see. Yeah. And my friend is still asleep on the couch, and I'm too afraid to wake him up because I think he's going to be mad at me. So I basically just sit there in like the fetal position, naked, just rocking myself back and forth and like just having a full crisis until finally I just kind of fall asleep and get woken up by my mom at like 8:00 the next morning for her to tell me that it's Easter and we have to go have a family brunch. I'm like still kind of in it. I'm like very foggy, and I'm and I'm just like, shit. And I'm like at brunch, just like miserable. Like I thought I was going to die. Like I'm pretty sure my family thought I was hungover, which I guess I kind of was, but not the way they thought.
Yeah.
And that was my first experience with mushrooms. And I stayed pretty far away from them for about 3 years after that. Because of course I thought it was the mushrooms' fault. I never could have fathomed the idea that, you know, maybe I just wasn't using this medicine intentionally and it's my fault.
That's a common challenge that a lot of people, I mean, you know, in the cannabis program I run, a lot of the people I talk to, you know, have that same result. They're like, and I had that same result actually. You know, for a long time I was like, I guess it's, you know, I can't smoke weed anymore because every time it makes me anxious. It's like cross out that it, put an I make me anxious, you know?
Exactly. I have a friend who the way he describes cannabis is the anxiety from cannabis is literally like your mom shining a flashlight on the bed under your bed and being like, you forgot to clean under there.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That feeling of like, I know I messed something up, but I don't know what it is. And she knows exactly what it is. Yeah. That's a very good description of it.
Yeah. And the anxiety from cannabis is like, honestly, so beautiful too, because if you really just like sit with it and like realize like, okay, this is coming up and really examine it, it really only lasts like 12 minutes. And then the rest of the cannabis ceremony is just beautiful, usually, because you're like, okay, I realized what I need to fix. Now let's look at some other awesome things. Like it's when I'm having intentional cannabis ceremonies where I like put on the blindfold and like really sit with it, I like almost try and induce the anxiety now. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It acts as a mirror, right? So it's showing you what's already inside of you. You know, that's like the big download that I tell everyone in the class is like, when you're getting undesirable, quote unquote, results with any plant medicine, but especially cannabis, it's all the more likely that whatever that is already inside of you. And the more that you think it's separate from you, the more you disempower yourself rather than saying, oh, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be experiencing right now. That's what I feel with psychedelics, you know, gets people in a lot of hot water is they have this belief that whatever I'm experiencing right now, this was not supposed to happen. When in reality, whatever happens is exactly what's supposed to happen, you know? And that's like one of the biggest, you know, shifts that I went through to now where, yeah, I have some really challenging experiences, but I'm able to like thank the medicine the whole way through. Like, thank you for this. Even if I don't believe it, I know that on the other side, I'll be able to look back and go, yeah, I needed that, you know? So
it's very humbling.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm curious, you know, after that experience, you know, how did you interact with psychedelics moving forward into the present day? You know, like what allowed you to change how you saw them from something that, you know, was causing you anxiety to something that, oh, that's showing me the anxiety already in me or the depression already in me or the addiction already in me or any of these things?
I think I had one psychedelic experience where I went in super unintentional and didn't take very much after like a few years after that first one. And that was interesting because I had been like drinking before and like, it was just not a good way to do it. Like psychedelics and alcohol, just that's not not the best idea for me, at least. Everyone's different, but yeah, probably don't.
My experience with that in my younger years told me the same conclusion.
Yeah. But so then actually after when I was 18, I just got out of rehab about maybe a month ago. And my friends wanted to do mushrooms. And I was in rehab for prescription pills at the time. So I really didn't see any issues. I was using cannabis again. I was using alcohol a little bit. And so I didn't really see any issue with mushrooms. I had also been doing research on how mushrooms can actually positively affect addiction. So I was really excited going into this. And we did it as intentionally as a bunch of 18-year-olds who don't really know about intention could. But it was a really just beautiful experience with my friends where I remember sitting in a field and the sky, the clouds were forming a kaleidoscope in the sky. And I looked around and all the trees were breathing.
Mm.
And I like told my friend, I was like, the trees are breathing. He's like, don't tell me that. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm here for it. And I just remember realizing how connected we all were. And I also remember in that experience realizing how I had been using pretty much anything I'd put in my body up until that point as a means to escape. And what the mushrooms showed me was there's nothing to run from. Like, this is all part of life, and everything is beautiful. And it really just gave me like a really profound love for myself.
That's beautiful.
And that was what I like to describe as what should have been my first mushroom experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank goodness that you were able to have that other first mushroom experience, because it gave you context, right? It gave you that lesson, right? It kind of bit you in a way to let you realize, like, hey, these are deeper than like a prescription pill or alcohol or even cannabis sometimes, right? Now, cannabis can definitely bite you, but, you know, let's talk about prescription pills and alcohol. It's definitely different than that, right? In the sense that a lot of these things, you know, they will make you face your demons, you know, and then what you did in that second experience was much more of like, oh, yeah, I faced them and I laughed at them and they ran away. Like, they weren't actually that demonic after all. Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm curious, you know, after you got out of rehab, was that your only time going into rehab, or was there multiple times? Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
That was my only time, but about three years later, I had become addicted to cocaine. And my whole thought process with Coke was, oh, it's not pills. It's not pills. And then all of a sudden, like, it was using it the same way I was using pills.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It's, you know, it's funny how our mind can run programs that convince us of those kind of things. Right. And I'd love to be able to hop into like the scenario in which, you know, you're now 21, right around that age, you're using cocaine, you're, you know, addicted. And what allowed you, whether it was psychedelics or self-development or a combination of both or whatever, what allowed you to finally realize the pattern that had come back with regards to addiction in your mind?
What I remember doing breath work for one of the first times right after I quit. I was going through, when I quit, I immediately went to one of the worst depressions I've ever been through in my life. I would only get out of bed if I was either going to work, where I would be on full autopilot, or if I was picking up an Uber Eats order from my doorstep, and then I'd go immediately back in my bedroom and eat it in there and like watch depressing TV. Yeah. And my friend sent me this Wim Hof video, and he basically was like, hey man, like, I really think this would help you with like your anxiety a little bit. And I was like, oh, well, what? I could give it a go. And so I tried it. And I remember as soon as I finished the session, having this immediate moment of, it was just like this voice as clear as day being like, you have been seeking out the external to fix your internal world, when really, like, if you focus on your internal world, it will also fix your external world. Like,
yeah, it's an inside job.
Yeah. And that got me into a big self-development rabbit hole. I started listening to Aubrey Marcus's podcasts a lot. I remember reaching out to my friend Harry, who's a healer in Los Angeles. Amazing guy, just beautiful soul. And he had been trying to get me to do this plant medicine ceremony that he puts on for over a year at this point. And I was just like terrified of it. I'm like, no, why? I'm like, why would I? It was psilocybin and MDMA. And I'm like, why would I take those and put on a blindfold? That's so stupid. Like, And of course, when I reach, of course, when I reach out to him, he goes, "Hey, Matt, it's really amazing to hear from you. I'm glad you're really starting to dive into this stuff. I have a ceremony on Saturday with one spot left and it's yours." He's like, "It's time."
Yeah.
And oh man, I was terrified, but I also knew that I really needed to do it. That ceremony was what really propelled my healing journey. And that ceremony was what made me stop missing cocaine.
Mm. Yeah. What was it about cocaine that was so, I mean, addicting is one word you could use, but what did you miss about it when you weren't interacting with it?
It gave me a really unhealthy confidence. I didn't know it was an unhealthy confidence at the time, but I was using it as a means for like confidence. Like if I was feeling bad about myself one day, I do a line and then all of a sudden I feel like Superman. Mm-hmm. And in that ceremony, I realized like just that, like the first big revelation I got from that ceremony was that I'm worthy of love. That came through to me so clearly. Not only I'm worthy of love from other people, but I'm worthy of giving myself love. And I always thought that was like a selfish concept. Like, oh, what, love yourself? Like, that's so ridiculous. But like the only way to love other people is to love yourself first.
Yes.
So,
it's a paradox.
Yeah. So that came through so clear to me. And I remember getting out of ceremony and just feeling, I felt like I had like finally, I felt like this huge weight had been removed from me. And like all this time I had been kind of like looking around the room and being like, what does everybody think of me? Like that was how I was going through life, is being like, what does everybody think of me? And how they think of me is how I should think of myself. And then I realized that, like, first of all, most people aren't putting too much thought into what they think of me, because in reality, they're seeing me and thinking, oh my God, what does he think of me?
Yeah, exactly. Yet another paradox.
Yeah. And so I realized like what's important is like, what do I think of myself? And I was really able to look at, like, there were aspects of my life that I was unhappy with at the time, but there's also so much of my life that I'd really been crushing it with lately. And also I was just like, I was giving myself love. It was like, I had literally finally just started giving myself love for the first time. And I just felt like I didn't need anything else to supply that for me, because I could supply it for myself. And what was really cool is after that, I still used cannabis and I still drank on occasion, but like my consumption levels went way down. And it actually got to the point where if I was like smoking a little too much weed or like having a few too many drinks, I'd be like, this is actually causing me to disconnect. It's not making me connect with people the way that I thought it was. It's actually causing me a disconnect from myself. And I really like enjoyed just like being sober for the first time ever.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point. I mean, I was, I haven't been challenged with addiction to things like prescription pills or cocaine or anything, but definitely tobacco when I was younger, cigarettes, which was, I thank God for that experience, because it showed me at a really young age what addiction was. And I was like, fuck all that. So when I was at parties and people will be doing lines or whatever, I just knew, I was like, I don't want to have to do that, because I'm like, yeah, I knew even at a young age, like, yes, I might feel great for 20 minutes, for 30 minutes, for an hour, for a night, right? But what's going to happen after? And I didn't know what would happen after, but I knew that it would get in the way of me enjoying myself. Then what happened was I fell into an unconscious addiction with cannabis. This went on for many years. Then I got into the cannabis industry where unconscious use is rampant. Oh, you can't OD on it. So everyone's just like smoking all day and no one really understands what they're doing to themselves and what cannabis is, and that same thing you were talking about, how it actually disconnects people. I started realizing that I would be interacting with cannabis with my friends and it would just be an escape. And it just hit me so hard one day. It was after work and, we were all excited to get out of work. We all worked at the dispensary, me and a bunch of my friends. And we used to go to this spot that like it's called the Quarries, and it overlooks like all of Boston. It's a sweet view, right? And so we're all talking a bunch, because I never used cannabis during the day. This is how this addiction slipped by me because I was so good with it, right? Like I knew like, okay, I'm not interacting with cannabis all day. I was really only smoking a bowl or two a day, but it was at night. But it was the reason in which I was going to use it, right? That was the addiction hiding in plain sight. And I remember we went to the Quarries and we all smoked a joint. And after that, no one was really talking to one another. We were all a little goofy. And again, it's like, it's no judgment, or anything like that. But I realized for myself in that moment, I'm like, yeah, this is not what I'm looking for anymore, and it was a big identity crisis, right? Because at that point, I had built my whole life around cannabis. I mean, I was going to be in the industry for the rest of my life. I was heading to be a master grower. That's the weirdest title for a grower. That's what they call people when they're a head grower. I just prefer to say head grower. Which egotistical dude made that up? I'm a master grower. It's like, that's weird. But, it was very interesting, and coming out of that.
He definitely watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, 100%. It's like there was some trauma there of some sort. It's like, what kind of grower am I? A master grower. It's like, listen, man. All right. Like anytime you think you're mastering Mother Nature, he got another thing coming, And so it's interesting. You had a very similar experience with cannabis because for me, cannabis has been my biggest teacher. And it's because it just mirrors me back to me. So there was so long where I was interacting with it and I was just like dead. And I would get burned out. I would get depleted. And really it was mirroring back my lack of purpose in life, and that was a big lesson for me. And so I'm curious, after you did that, first of all, I want to talk about that psilocybin and MDMA journey. When you put the blindfold on, like, what was different about, I don't know if you had done MDMA at that point before that, but what was different about having the blindfold on? Like, I want to get into that because that's something that like, I feel a lot of people do. I do when I'm interacting with psilocybin or other medicines, and it's so valuable. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
So I had done MDMA many times before that. I actually went through an experience in college where I was doing it so often that I had to stop completely. And so that was my first time using MDMA in years at that point. And what we did is we sat with the MDMA for about an hour with the blindfold on before we even took the psilocybin. And what's so amazing about blindfolds is there is nowhere to hide. It's just basically taking your vision and inverting it into you.
Yes. And
I remember just feeling so connected to myself when in the past, when I would do MDMA, all I'd want to do is connect to other people. I'd be like, who are you? Who are you? Oh my God, will you scratch my back? Like,
yep.
Yeah, just rub tiger balm on me.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was finally just like connecting to myself in such a beautiful way. And like, I felt like I wasn't really moving. I couldn't even really feel my body, but I could just see my spirit and like my soul. And I realized like I had been painting myself as like this bad guy for my entire life because I was really aggressive in high school. I was really just like back when I was using pills, I was also selling narcotics and doing really bad things to people to get narcotics for free. Not going to incriminate myself here.
Yeah.
But I'd never really like forgiven myself, even though I had really like worked through everything, all of it up to that point, and like felt like I wasn't, I didn't think that I necessarily was a bad person anymore, but I still didn't forgive myself. And through that experience with the MDMA, I was able to just forgive myself for all these things and realize that like pretty much everything I've ever done in my life that I think back on and like cringe or like tense up was really the underlying thing there was I was just trying to connect.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to feel okay. And the MDMA kind of showed me that like, it's okay to forgive yourself.
Yes. Yeah. That's, for me, there's no mystery to me why MDMA specifically is having such beautiful results in psychoassisted therapies. I mean, having interacted with that medicine myself, I mean, I didn't even know what love was before that. And someone might hear that and go, oh, you need drugs to understand what love is. And it's like, no, but if you look at Disney movies and how we're brought up, we're taught that love is a certain thing, right? That you have to fight to get, right? Or not even fight to get, you have to work to get, you have to get, period, right? And when I interacted with that medicine, I realized, oh, love is all I am. Love is all that everything is. And all I have to do is begin looking at already what's in front of me with this new belief, and life changed forever after that. And for me, that's how I distinguish medicine that quote unquote works for me and is a good medicine for me from a medicine that is a quote unquote bad medicine or medicine that doesn't work for me, is how well does this shift my life moving forward in a positive manner? And when I think about, those experiences, MDMA is at the absolute top, simply because it showed me who and what I truly was, which is pure unconditional love. And then I went, well, if I understand spiritually that we're all the same, and I know that I am now unconditional love, then what does that make everyone else? Oh my goodness, that makes everyone unconditional love. Okay. So then when I see someone acting out, or when I see someone yelling at someone, I can see that now is not they're a bad person, or they're, fucked up, or any of these limiting beliefs. They're someone who's most likely hurting, right? And it allowed me to interact with people in a totally different way, and interact with myself in a new way, and have awareness around when I'm that guy yelling, like, what am I missing, right? I'm missing that knowing that of who and what I truly am, which once again is pure unconditional love. And so, it really allowed me to move forward. And now, I mean, especially, I'm so grateful for those experiences now being in the coaching world, and being able to take those gifts and those lessons and, the medicines that I continue to do in ceremonies and such, and take those lessons forward and help people remember who and what they truly are. Because I really feel as though all that happens is we fall off course every once in a while. And the problem is that the mind starts judging, the inner critic, all these different aspects of us, the pain body. I mean, that's something we could get into heavy, but when it really comes down to it, we're all searching for the same thing. Even the quote unquote worst people thought they were doing something good when they did horrible things, right? And so, no one's out there specifically being like, I want to be the worst person in the world, right? They're trying to find happiness in their own way. And so it makes them more relatable when you interact with something like MDMA and you realize, oh, okay, these are just little boys and little girls trying to look for love in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's such a good way of putting it. And one thing that was really cool about pairing MDMA with psilocybin, it was like having a security blanket. So the psilocybin would be like, hey, these are some things that you don't like looking at that I'm going to show you. But it's okay because you have the MDMA to like make you just like fearless at looking at it and being like, okay, I'm not looking at these things from a judgmental point. I'm looking at these things from a place of love.
Yeah.
And
like, awesome.
acceptance.
I get to upgrade. Yeah. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for showing me that. I'm so excited to redo that and reverse it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's huge, and it's funny you mentioned like a security blanket, because I'm often famous for saying very similar things. The times in which I've interacted with those two medicines together, it's been that exact same type of that feeling. It's like, how did I put it? It's like training wheels in a way, right? Where like you can't really fall over so much as if you could without training wheels, or that you would without training wheels. And so I love that. And I'm curious, when did you start getting into self-development work? I mean, it sounds like it was right around that time, but I'm curious, how those two things meshed: plant medicine / psychedelics and self-development work.
So I started getting into self-development work right before that ceremony. And then that ceremony showed me, oh my God, this isn't something you should dabble in. This is something you should put all of your focus on. And about a month later, I remember seeing Aubrey post about this thing called Fit for Service, and I didn't know what it was, but I just had like this feeling, like it started off as a whisper and then turned into a scream of like, you need to apply. So I applied, and on paper, I never should have got in. Like I always say as a joke, like that I slipped through the cracks, but like in reality, like the coaches and the people went over my application. It was the first time I filled out an application for anything. And I was like, I'm just going to be 100% honest. I'm not going to try and like impress these people or like say what I think they want to hear. I'm just going to honestly answer these questions as openly as I can. And I think what they probably saw in me was that like this person's not very far in his developmental path, but he really wants to take it as far as he can go. And it's the best decision I ever made. If I wouldn't have joined Fit for Service, I never would have moved to Austin, which means I met Chris at a Fit for Service summit, the guy who introduced me and you. And he wasn't in Fit for Service, but he just happened to be at Sedona at the time. And one of my friends was friends with him and invited him to my party. And we just like hit it off. And then I eventually did his retreat, which is how we met, which thank God, because I can't imagine a world where I don't know you.
Thank you, Chris. You're the raddest guy. Chris is the man.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
He is for so many reasons. I love that man.
Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, he's one of the first people that I met on like the second half of like, I'd say, if you look at Paul Chek's The I, the We, and the All, I had done a metric fuck ton of work on the I, right? So I thought. And then the first step in the We was going down to Mark England's house, meeting Chris and all of them. And then literally, as soon as we were there, Chris is like, similar thing to what you were saying before. I'm hosting a retreat next week in Colorado. I got one spot left. You in? And I texted Rachel and I was like, I think I need to go. And she was like, buy that goddamn ticket. And I went and damn, the rest is history. So yeah, thank you, Chris. Shout out. Yeah. And, I'm curious, man, what is it about Fit for Service that was so fun? Because, obviously I've followed Aubrey for years and Kyle and Eric. I've seen Eric, go from being someone who just like really wanted to get in touch with Aubrey to reaching out to him. I've heard the whole story before when they did the podcast, and it's so inspiring, like go for what you want and be persistent. Right. And that's essentially what you were doing when you applied there. You're like, listen, I'm not going to tell you that I went to Harvard or any of these silly things to impress you. I'm going to tell you exactly what is true, which is, yeah, here's where I'm at in my journey, and I'm willing to do anything to get farther. And look what it did for you, right? Like honesty is so important for yourself first, right? And also people can feel the reverberation of that and the ripple effect of it. And luckily we live in 2021 now where honesty is cool. It's the cool thing to be now. You used to have to be fake. No one wants to see your fake Lamborghinis anymore. They don't care. It's a very different world we're moving into now. And thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Fit for Service was such a beautiful thing for me because I remember before we even had a summit, we had an unofficial meetup in Austin. And I remember feeling so good around these people, but I didn't really know why. And then me and a couple of the friends I made that weekend decided to do a little bit of mushrooms one of the nights. And I remember being in the bathroom and just kind of like sitting with myself for a second because I was just feeling this like such joy and like acceptance. And I realized, I was like, oh my God, this is the first time in my life I have done nothing but be myself. And this is by far the most accepted I've ever felt in my life. And I realized, I'm like, all right, this is the new standard. This isn't some crazy experience that I'm only having once. This is what I want all my experiences to be. And it just gave me the freedom to just fully be myself and not be afraid of who I am anymore.
Yeah, I imagine it allowed you to tune into your masculinity and go, fuck yes, right? And realize like this is something I came to a very similar point the last year and a half where there was a certain medicine ceremony I did. I forget what it was. It's probably mushrooms because mushrooms are one of my other favorite teachers. And we stereotypically get along very well. And sometimes they can show me some tough love, but we always, make amends. But there was this moment where I realized that I had a pattern of people pleasing. And I had had it most of my life. And, it was something I was very embarrassed about, within myself. And it was all unconscious to me. Like this all like started to come out when I was, on mushrooms, I think mushrooms. And so, I realized in that moment, I'm like, why am I people pleasing? And it was like, what's there? And it was like, okay, well, the excuse was, I want everyone to be happy. Great. Sounds like a fairy tale. Is that actual reality? Nope. No one's ever going to be fully happy with you. Someone's always going to hate on you. Someone's always going to have something to say. So if I people please, who do I actually end up making happy? Everyone else except me, because at some point I'm going to have to dumb myself down or belittle myself or, be less of myself to make the people around me happy. And then I just had this hilarious thought that got me laughing so hard, which was, wait a minute. there's 7.5 billion people on the planet. I don't have enough time in my whole life to even meet that many people. So why am I acting as if that's the reality, that I'm going to get to meet every single person on earth and it's my job to make them happy? I'm like, I'll be lucky if I meet 10,000 people my whole life, right? Or 100,000, let's say, if we're really getting crazy with it and being unreasonable. And so it's like, I want to make sure the people that I interact with are exactly the right people for me. So that's when I was like, I want to start putting stuff about plant medicines out there. I want to start putting stuff about masculinity, men having a feminine side, all this stuff that is going to essentially get as many people out of the way as possible, as fast as possible, right? Like, I want to do things that essentially grenade my people pleasing. So if a bunch of people think that psychedelics are it's like, good, I want those people out of my life because that's not what I believe. And so it became like, I'm trying to get people out of the way as fast as possible now, where it's like, there's 7.5 billion people. I'm never going to make all of them happy. I just want the people that are 100% in alignment with what I want. And so it's funny you had a similar experience with that. So interesting.
Yeah. Wild.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so cool too, because once you really know who you are and you're willing to stand in that, the people who you attract are just the greatest people in the world who also know exactly who they are. And it's just like a whole different level of connection.
Yes. And what's funny is I actually realized in that too, because then part of me was like, okay, well, it's a little selfish to only think about yourself here and be like, all right, well, yeah, I only want the people that are going to be in direct alignment with me. And then I started realizing, no, it's not though, because, if I people please and then people come into my network who might not vibe with me and I don't vibe with them, then I'm wasting their time too, right? Like, I'm essentially telling them I'm this person when really I'm not. And then I'm wasting their time. So it's actually a gift to both of us equally. If I say, hey, I like all these things. Do you like them? No? Okay, awesome. We probably shouldn't be friends, right? Because we're going to get into some conflicts and we're not going to be the best medicine for one another. Everyone's got the perfect people that are medicine for them, right? And it might look messed up. People that like to talk shit are going to find other people that like to talk shit. And that's where their happiness is, their quote unquote happiness. And there's no point in me trying to say, you shouldn't talk shit, blah, 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 all these things, like, because that's not their reality. That's me projecting what I feel is right onto them. And so, yeah, it's like live for yourself first, because like you were saying, like, no one's going to love you more than you love you. And no one's going to be your cheerleader more than you are, And so those were important lessons that, I'm very fortunate that psychedelics relayed to me, helped me take the clouds away from my clouded mind to be able to see like, oh my God, this is silly. I'm going to be myself unapologetically. And you know what? It's been working out amazing. I mean, we hit it off. I mean, the whole crew in Austin, Virginia, California, Oregon, got Colorado. Dude, we've had some amazing times. And that's only because all of us decided to be ourselves, period, unapologetically.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's so cool about that is you'd think that by doing that, you'd only really have like a couple friends, but like really it's like you meet someone who's in alignment with you and they show you 3 other people who are in alignment with you. And now we literally have an army across the country of dope people who like share our values. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's when you realize like, holy shit, I underestimated how many people 330 million are in this country alone. Right. So it's like, how many people can you really have in your network and keep in touch with? Think about how many people Aubrey has in his network. He can't personally reach out to every single person there, right? Like he'd have to give up sleep and he'd have to be on Adderall all day, every day, just on a computer to even get close. And so that's why, once again, it was like, this is so silly. I'm going to simply be myself and allow my energy to bring in the people that are right for me, because otherwise it's doing a disservice to me first and anyone else who I bring into my network. And that's just, that was a no-go for me. Hard limit. Mm-hmm. So one thing I'm curious about, right, is, I've talked to you at length about your experiences with Bufo. And I feel like this is a great time in the conversation to bring up the conversation of Bufo. And so I'd love if you could explain what Bufo is for people who might not know that term for it, and, how you got introduced to it. You don't have to use names or anything, but how you were introduced to it and what it's done for you, what it opened up for you, and, how you compare it to other medicines.
So Bufo it comes from a toad, actually. And it contains 5-MeO DMT, which has the nickname the God molecule, because it basically just like connects you to source instantly. And
yes,
I had my first Bufo experience almost a year ago, last September. And I heard about it from one of my friends who actually serves it. And I looked into it and I realized that I kind of thought it was like the quote unquote Joe Rogan DMT, which is MNDMT, which is also amazing. But Bufo it's different. It's more powerful. It's considered the most powerful psychedelic on the planet because when you're in it, we'll get to that, but it's very powerful. And so I remember going to the ceremony and being really nervous on the way there, but also really excited. And when I got there, I was just greeted by my friend, who's amazing, and one of the guys she facilitates with, and just feeling like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm in the presence of unconditional love and just total safety. And he warned me, or he didn't warn me, but he basically explained to me, like, you know, when you go into it, it's not going to be incredibly visual. He was like, you're going to have your hands out. And if you can move your hand enough to like reach with your fingers, that means you're not in it enough. So just move your hands. And if you're moving your hands, that means you need more. I did not have to move my hands.
Yeah. That's pretty accurate.
The first time I did it, I wasn't able to process the experience as well as the second time because the first experience was so big that basically, I guess the best way to describe it is I dissolved into the everything. I didn't have a brain. I didn't have a body. I didn't have lungs. I didn't feel like I was breathing or anything. I was just in what I would describe as like this really bright white light. And the only thought I had for the entire experience was, did I die? And then I was like, well, if I did, there's nothing I can do about it. So whatever. And I came out laughing hysterically with just like this like huge appreciation for life. I wasn't able to integrate it properly because the ceremony got pushed a couple days back and I was moving to Austin that weekend. So I was literally like, after the ceremony, I was basically like packing up my apartment and driving to Austin. So I didn't get to do as much integration as I'd wanted to. But then a few weeks later, I was in a Wachuma ceremony, and in the ceremony, they were giving meditative doses of Bufo to people. And the whole weekend, one of my really good friends, she'd been telling me like, hey, like for this past week, like you've been reaching a lot with stuff. Like she's like, you know, she's like, I know you're doing these things ceremonially, but like, she's like, you've been reaching with like ketamine, I've noticed. And like, you've also been reaching with cannabis. And she's like, I just want you to keep an eye on that. Basically, every time she calls me out on my shit, I basically at first get defensive and then I'm like, you're right. And so she called me out on this. And during the Wachuma ceremony, it already had 2 cups. And I remember I really wanted a 3rd cup. And so I was like, I was looking for my friend to get a 3rd cup. And they announced that it's time for the meditative dose of Bufo. And I have the meditative dose and I really just kind of feel it in my body and it's beautiful. And I'm like, I need another hit of this meditative dose. And so I take another hit and I go fully back into like, I'd say if my ceremony was like 100%, I was at 99%. Like I legitimately thought I died sitting by this creek. And I come back and I'm wearing a Speedo that's wet because I'd been swimming and I'm freezing. And I was convinced I had died. And I realized later, like, that I had been reaching that entire week with stuff. And Bufo was like, oh, if you're going to reach for me, I'm going to show you why you should never reach again. Yeah. It was just the ultimate humbler. And it made me really scared of my next Bufo experience, which is also an amazing experience. But it just really, I remember it really showed me like, hey, you're reaching a lot. And just because you're not like a full blown drug addict anymore doesn't mean you don't still have a little bit of those tendencies sometimes. And so it's basically just like, all right, I'm going to give you some tough love here. And it just boom, blasted me to source. And it was rough, but it was exactly what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah. The couple times I've interacted with Five, both times, I've done an NDMT enough to, like, honestly, the stuff frightens me every time. Like, I go into it with so much reverence, and there are certain medicines like mushrooms where I'm like, oh, I'm excited, like, I know I might see some dark stuff or, anything like that, but I'm excited. Five is like, I really like, that's how I know I don't have addictive tendencies, is when I do things like Five. Now, if you do like a very light dose, yeah, it can feel like breath work, right? And we've done a lot of that type of breath work together, and it can be really nice. But in the large doses, like, shocker, but it's scary to me when I go through a death process, right? It's like, shocker, I know, right? And I do call it that, a death process. And the couple times I've done it and successfully gone through like a full dose of it, I do come back laughing hysterically. And the funny thing was, when we were doing the breath work in Austin, we were all coming back hysterically laughing. And I started really asking myself, what's going on there? And I started, like, my best hypothesis is that we realize we get the experience, the direct experience of how easy death is, right? And it's the cosmic giggle. Oh my God, everyone's walking around so scared of death. And really, the scary part is being alive. Death is like taking off a tight shoe, as Ram Dass says. You go back to like unconditional love land, is what I want to call it. Heaven, you can call it source, you can call it whatever, right? God. But what happens after you die is generally very awesome. And so, it's mostly hard just for the people that are left here. And I was talking to a very, very wise individual, a guy who this guy has died twice in his life, been brought back to life. He's an incredible energy healer, and he's actually a doctor, like a registered doctor too. And so, he came to my house a couple months back, and we were chatting. And this is a guy that completely 100% sober. Like, I'm not even interacting with like CBD hemp flower, nothing, right? And this guy will blow your mind like you're on psychedelics. And he said this thing, and he was like, yeah, when I died, it was the best experience of my life. He's like, I was riding the lightning, and I knew exactly what he meant when he said that, because I had experienced that on Five. It was like being shot out of a lightning bolt. And, he said something to me that was so profound. And he's like, don't ever feel bad when someone dies. He's like, I get it. Like, you can feel bad that you missed that person, but don't feel bad for them, because they're in pure bliss. And that was something that, really allowed me to realize, like, yeah, like I believe that, because I've had the direct experience of it. And, for something like Five, there really is no way to explain it. Like, we can try with words, but words like give us 0.0001% of what actually happens when you experience something like that. And for anyone listening, like, this is not a medicine, like Matt was saying, it's not a medicine you just do willy-nilly, right? It's not a medicine you decide to do when you're hanging out watching TV, right? It's a very sacred medicine. And, if you're interested in it, make sure you find a place that knows what they're doing, that is licensed and all those things. I believe there is some ways in which, like, certain churches use it legally and stuff in the country. And I believe you can do it in Mexico as well. But, this is not advice. Do not take this as advice, but it is very curious that we've had similar experiences to that. So, man, this has been so much fun, dude, getting to riff with you, getting to hear all the backstories of how you got into psychedelics and what they've done for your development as an individual, as a man, etc. And I'm curious, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you, especially those that are listening that might themselves or have someone in their life that is challenged with addiction and might want to talk to someone who's actually gone through that before? Where can they find you to get in touch with you, keep up with what you're doing and all that stuff?
Thank you for asking that, because I love when people reach out to me about this. My Instagram would be the best place. It's Mad Bundy. So MADDBUNDY. And yeah, please reach out to me, because something I want to get into more actually is addiction counseling. But before I even do that, like, I'd love to just talk to anybody, and anyone who's listening to this who might be struggling with addiction. I want to make this so clear. You have nothing to be ashamed of at all.
Beautiful words, man. Beautiful. And, I've had many friends who have been touched by addiction, and, I know those words are going to help a lot of people. And so thank you for that. And I have one final question for you, my man. If you're up for it, what do you say? You down?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I figured you'd say yes. So if someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is one piece of advice you would give them to allow them to have the smoothest experience possible?
Set and setting are your best friends, and also know your why.
Yes. Yeah. That is spoken like a true pro right there. Know why you're doing it. Because if you go into it in Emily Bimbley, you know, I think of it like a salsa dance. This is one of the best analogies that one of the gentlemen going through Connect with Cannabis gave for cannabis, and it reigns true with all psychedelics. Even if you're a woman listening to this, just imagine yourself as the man in the salsa dance, right? You're the leader, right? And your job is to connect eyes with that woman and let her know, I got you, right? And then she can fully express, because she knows that you're going to hold her, and she knows that like you're not going to just drop her, right? And she knows that she doesn't have to control what's happening. She gets to just fully express and surrender. And so if you go into a psychedelic experience not being that masculine entity of saying like, there's a reason I want to do this, this is where I want to go, I don't care how I get there, I'm surrendered to how I get there, but this is my goal, right? If you don't have that, oh man, I mean, that can be extremely challenging. So yeah, beautiful, man. I love that. And guys, when Matt hit me up about coming on the show, I immediately said yes and was beyond excited to feature him for all of you to hear. A lot of times we hear about the potential of psychedelics with regards to challenges such as addiction, but to have the opportunity to have him come on and share his personal journey was something I felt was so powerful and inspiring, as it personalizes a concept that many of us have only read about until now. Matt is a bright light of a human who will go to the ends of the earth to help those he loves. And if you listen to this episode and you yourself or someone you know is struggling in the throes of addiction, then please reach out to Matt and allow him to help you move through those challenges. And also, if you have yet to leave us a review and rating on iTunes, then please hop over there and show us some love. As this show is a newer venture, we appreciate all the love you give us, as it helps us reach a larger audience and get these shows out to the people who need them most, which we are eternally grateful for. Matt, thank you so much once again for stopping by to hang out with us and share your journey in psychedelic medicines with us. And until next time, my friend, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.